My name is Monk Rowe for the Phileas Jazz Archive. I'm very appreciative of Jerry Hey joining me for a chat. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We have a couple of things in common. One of them, we were both born in 1950.
Very true.
It was a very good year.
Yeah, very good year.
When you think about growing up and listening to the radio, let's say by the time you were 10, 12, do you recall the variety of music that you could absorb through AM radio back then?
Uh, I didn't really listen to AM radio until probably I got to high school or maybe seventh or eighth grade, and the kind of the Beatles came in, and so that's kind of the first AM radio that I listened to. For the most part, I was listening to records that my dad had bought.
Which were what?
Which were he heard Clifford Brown live in 1954, I believe, in Chicago. I'm from Illinois. So he went into Chicago and heard Clifford Brown live, and then bought his first. It was a 10-inch record then, came out up a 33 RPM, but it was 10 inches. And it had the original version of Cherokee on it and Easy Living and, some great stuff. So I had that. And then as Clifford Brown records came out, my dad would buy those and some other Dixieland, and my older brother had some records of Frank Rosalino, and my brother was a trombone player. So it was a lot of listening to records more than listening to AM radio.
Well, that's fortunate for your musical tastes, I think.
Definitely.
It's a pretty hip place to start.
Yeah.
Did the idea of becoming a trumpet player as a profession take a while to gel for you?
Yes, it did. I started very early because, as I said, my older brother was a trombone player, and in the Boy Scouts, he played the bugle for whatever they taps and reveille and all that stuff in the Boy Scouts, and brought it home one day, and literally I just picked it up when I was kind of 2, and then at age 3 I got my first trumpet and played with my mom in church on Mother's Day. She played piano and I played then cornet. And so I started early, and it was just something I always did. I didn't really know anything else. And kept playing, and I knew I was good. There was a really great band program in my hometown, run by this guy who was basically the music man, it was 15,000 in this town, and there were 3 bands in elementary school of 100. This guy, everyone in town played an instrument in grade school. So, you have that many people, and yes, there are going to be a lot of really good people come out of that. So, I kept playing, and then eventually I went to Interlochen arts music camp, and got kind of a rude awakening there, because you go from small town to the best in the business there, and there are really a lot of great players there then. The years that I went, Phil Collins, who played first in in Cincinnati for a long time, really great player. James Thompson, who played in Detroit and Montreal, I think, first trumpet with them, and 5 or 6 just world-class guys there in high school. So you learn in a hurry whether how you fit. So
This would have happened to you, but I had this fascination with big bands when I was about that age, and I remember parents taking me to see what would have been the Glenn Miller Ghost Orchestra, if you want to use that term. And I played the saxophone and I was staring up at them and saying, that's what I really want to do. Did you
Yeah.
have that kind of experience?
My dad was a trombone player also. So he took me to hear Duke Ellington's band, and then also took me to hear Stan Kenton, probably when I was 16 or 17, both of those, I guess. It wasn't really something I wanted to do, was playing a big band. I liked it, but it wasn't, I don't know, I hadn't really, didn't stir me up to, become a lead trumpet player or anything. But at the time I was taking trumpet lessons from a guy in Chicago Symphony. So I was playing C trumpet in high school. And kind of going that direction to be a classical trumpet player. And this guy was another, like, a world-class player, and who has become one of the foremost teachers in the US for sure, Charlie Geyer. So, I was kind of going that direction through high school. And he wanted me to go to Northwestern and study with Vincent Chikowitz, who was playing second trumpet at the time in Chicago Symphony, and kind of do that route. So,
Can you recall the first time that you understood that a song, a pop song, could have things added to it, like horns, and the first time you ever got a pair of headphones on and had that experience? That's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't remember the first time. I remember listening when I started listening to AM radio in the late 60s, I guess. And there were, some horns on things. The Beatles had a few horns, Penny Lane, piccolo trumpet solo, and some of the other things. And then I guess Tower of Power, sort of, in Chicago, were kind of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Those kind of, the early versions of those were the first thing that the guys, the horns sound really good, and that's kind of interesting. I didn't really think much about it, but okay, they're those guys are making a living playing trumpet. Okay.
So what led you to believe that you could do that?
When So I went to Indiana University and studied with this William Adam trumpet teacher, just the greatest man I've ever met. And nothing to do with trumpet, just a brilliant man in all aspects of life. And he kind of made you play trumpet for any occasion. You have to learn how to play trumpet before you can play the piccolo solo on Penny Lane, or before you can play a jazz solo, or before you can play lead. And with you got to be able to play the trumpet. It's about learning how to play the trumpet with him. So you were kind of set up I went in as a classical trumpet player, then heard these other guys playing. They would play in the orchestra, then they'd play first in the jazz bands at Indiana, and they play jazz solos. And I go, well, wow, those guys sound great, and they're playing all styles. That's kind of what I want to do. So it was kind of an open door there for me to sort of spread my horizon from the legit world into whatever needs trumpet, I'm kind of available for. So from then I moved to Hawaii with one of the trumpet players that I met at Indiana, and we started working over there, and we formed a band over there, and we're playing some top 40 tunes, Aretha Franklin and Tower of Power and those kind of things, and we got to have horn parts. So I transcribed the horn parts from the record, and that was kind of the beginning of, you know, my really listening to records and kind of trying to understand how the horns sounded on those records and how can we do that.
And a bit of delicious irony. I was in a band, many bands in the 70s and so forth. And that was my job as well, to listen to the records. And some of the horn parts that I was transcribing were written by you.
Uh-oh, sorry.
And it you know, it's the rests. It's the little 16th rests and so forth that are the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah. That, you know, I tried to make it a little tricky here and there and change up things here and there. And
it's
so,
almost like some of the things at the time you were doing were almost like writing out clavinet rhythms. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that. That's good.
Well, I want to fast forward a little bit and really try to get into your thinking about when you got an assignment, a commission to write horn parts for a specific record. I think I read that, first of all, you have perfect pitch. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when you got a lead sheet, what did they give you? What did their producer give you? And did you pay attention to it?
Almost in every case, all I got was, well, back then, a cassette. You know, Quincy, David Foster, any of these things, they would send me a cassette of the song. That's it. If I ever got a lead sheet, which was rare, I never looked at it, because by the time the lead sheet, I did it in the beginning. Okay, here's the lead guy sent me the lead sheet, usually just kind of rough chords. And I figured out that, okay, well, wait, they repeated that, and then they cut out these bars the next time, and then they did this the next, you know, it was like more work to look at their lead sheet than for me to take 5 minutes and write out a chart, a rough chart. And then with that, you know, just kind of a pencil sketch of the tune, I would intensely listen to the song. I mean, that's one of the better things that I think I do, is listen to what they're giving me, because they're, you know, that's going to stay. My horn parts, if I write some horn parts, they're not necessarily going to stay, but this is the rock for them. And I'm just going to be on top of that. So I have to know exactly what they like and what's there. So I would know every keyboard voicing, all the guitar parts, the bass part, the drum fills. I would know all of that stuff and know where the vocal is that I shouldn't be. So that was kind of the modus of how I would write horn parts, is start with all of that and listen to the song, and then where does anything need to be?
You pretty much answered a question of mine, because I've done some of this, and I wondered, you seem to be indicating that what was on the cassette was pretty much a finished rhythm track, and it had a vocal on it, whether it was just a scratch vocal or something to show you where the singing was.
Some of the Earth, Wind, and Fire stuff, the vocals were really sketchy. So sometimes that's why some of the Earth, Wind, and Fire horn parts are busy and kind of stepping on the vocals because there were no vocals there in some cases. Like I Am, that had just kind of a really rough, sketchy vocal. So, you know, the track, which was basically David Foster, you just write whatever you want to write, and Maurice will deal with it. You know, take some horns out that there, or, you know, so
That's interesting. Now, if you hear that, and you might say to yourself, well, I wouldn't have written that there had
definitely.
I known.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Tom Bones Malone recently, and he said the idea is you don't conflict with a vocal because it's the most important thing. I'm just putting horns on, make sure that they occur in their own space, because I'm just the frosting on the cake.
Absolutely. That is 100% right. If you're playing when the vocal is playing, the horns are not going to be heard because the vocal has to be heard.
Did anybody ever have to tell you that, or did you just know it?
I guess it was a combination of listening to all of those top 40 records that I had to transcribe, and okay, well, you know, they're kind of got the horns have their own thing, you know, it's their, you know, there's a vocal and there's the horn parts, and, you know, so kind of got that. Then I went in with Quincy doing something sometime, and you know, we just kind of talked about kind of how to approach it. And he said, yeah, he said, you know, you want to stay away from the vocal, and you want to try to, you know, become part of the rhythm track, you know. So if they're obviously the rhythm hits or whatever, or a melody line, instrumental melody line, should we play, you know, you want to be kind of blend into the track like you were there from the beginning.
Tom also said an interesting thing, that you were basically the king of the unisons, which I thought was interesting.
It with horn parts, when you have a lot of voicing and you have a lot of movement, you can, I try to think of the horn parts as a melody, and when you have a lot of harmony, and they're not going to be, it's not like a big band where the horns are going to be featured and you're going to hear all of the parts and everything. They're going to put the horns down a little bit, and the melody part that I write for horns can get lost with all of the harmony. So if there's a line of that you want to kind of emphasize and make sure everybody remembers, unison will come through better than a harmonized part.
Who makes the call in a situation, a typical pop situation, that your horn parts are on the record or they end up on the cutting room floor?
Always, well, not always, but the producer always has the last say. Sometimes, depending on how big the artist is, the artist can have a say in it. But, you know, it's generally the producer. Because, I mean, a lot of times the artist isn't even there when we do the horn parts.
Have you ever had a producer who was inclined to say, guys, that was perfect, let's do another one?
Oh, all the time, you know.
What are they looking for?
Well, just you know, they're trying to get the magic somehow, and they don't kind of always realize that, especially with brass instruments, trumpets included, it's not necessarily the more times you play it, the better it's going to get. You know, there's a point at which it starts going downhill kind of in a hurry, especially when it's really intense and involved and technically difficult. So fortunately, I've had enough success that I can say that's it's never going to get any better than that. If you don't like the way that sounds, I can change it. But, that was really good, so,
You mentioned Penny Lane, and I've read the anecdotes about how Paul McCartney heard this piccolo trumpet, and then he sang what he wanted the piccolo trumpet to play, and George Martin wrote it down. Have you ever had those situations in the studio where either the artist or the producer or something, hey Jerry, this would probably sound good, and they start vocalizing something at you?
yeah, of course.
Okay.
Michael Jackson in a couple instances, uh, David Foster in a couple instances, who also has perfect pitch, and keyboard perfect pitch, which is kind of crazy that he can listen to a song one time and play it back to you. Really amazing, and he's also wonderful in the studio. It's a brilliant musical mind, and he would sing some things. This is back in the day. Now it's everybody's got a demo, and you kind of play what the demo is.
So did you always have score paper with you?
No, I would carry around single line sheets, and if for the most part they're not singing us like a whole like section of stuff. It's a phrase or two that they want to change. Maurice White, we'd go in and play my arrangement just rough the first time. I mean, really mistakes and everything, just so he could kind of get the idea of where I was thinking. And then, we'd sit down and he'd say, well, how about if we try this? And he'd sing one phrase, here instead of what I had. So that, but, I just take a single line thing, and whatever that was, they'd sing it to me and I just write it down. And then, we'd go out, and everybody's so fast in the studio. I'd sing it to them or play it to them, and everybody'd learn it, and we'd record it and move on.
Did the Jerry Hay horns individuals get their parts beforehand?
Only on a couple occasions did I send Gary Grant like any kind of real technical thing that I had written. Just one or two bars, kind of a la the Speed Demon lick in Michael Jackson, if you know that. That crazy one. So I sent him that one, just so we go in. Saxophones, they can play anything, but that intense of a trumpet lick. So because I wrote it, I know it, and I can play it. And if Gary's got a little head start on something, then it's fewer takes for us to try to get it together, because you got four guys, and there's a good chance that it's going to be somebody's going to need to do another take, and the fewer takes you can get on those really hard licks like that, the better. But
did you ever write anything that you couldn't play?
If I couldn't play it, I wouldn't write it. But yeah, back in the day, it was, anything goes back then. Chuck Finley can play anything. Gary's amazing. So, and Bill Reichenbach and the trombone is also, just world-class flair. Amazing bass trombone player, plays drums, great writer. And Larry Williams also was in Sea Wind, and Dan Higgins, who is just a brilliant musician. So, you go in with those kind of guys like that, and now Wayne Bergeron added to the mix. It doesn't mean you can write anything and these guys are going to play it. Might take a couple takes, but it's going to get played.
Do you get ideas in your head, even when you're not really engaged in working. I guess I think I saw your dog come through the room. And when I take my dog for a walk, if I'm working on an arrangement, I get these things, I'm thinking more about how am I going to solve this little issue? I wonder if this happens to you.
It's kind of in passing. If I hear something and I go, oh, the other day I heard some vocal riff that was, wow, that was really cool. How can we make that? How can I make that into a horn part that works? Stuff like that. But if I'm, kind of working on a song, and I used to like to, listen to it, work on it, then, take a walk, and then without hearing the track, kind of think, okay, here's sort of the, what about this? And then come back and kind of refine that.
Do you employ the computer to write your horn parts now?
About 10 years ago, a guy was working on, he wanted to do a Broadway show. And it was kind of on Studio 54 back in the sort of disco days, kind of. And he had these songs and he wanted me to send him demos. And I said, well, I got like 40 years of demos out there. You know what I do. If you want me to write horn parts, you've heard kind of what I do. And he said, yeah, but it's for this Broadway show and I want to make sure. And okay, so I had my son, who was a recording engineer and a brilliant one at that, set me up in Logic. So I am just barely hanging on in Logic, but I can do a horn part in there and it sounds pretty good, with some kind of cheesy horn samples, when people need a demo. And if they don't need a demo, then I'll do the horn parts in there and then I can print them out and they look pretty good coming out of there. So, I mean, it takes a minute to get to make it sound like I want it to sound, to make it how it should look is a total different animal. So like when you're doing like, say you're doing something like just that little turn like that, you have to kind of put a little grace notes in the middle of it, and then you look at that on the paper and it looks horrible.
Right.
So then you have to say, okay, so you just make that like that, and then you put a turn on top of it in the written music. So, and if you want to do, what else is an issue like that? Just a whole bunch of things like that. To make it, if you're going to have, let's see, I don't know, but the notes aren't all beamed. The 16th note's separate, so I try to make it, I like to see every beat in a bar. So I make it so that you look at it, where that note is going to come,
Exactly.
16th, whatever.
I know what you mean. You want to be able to see the rests and the beats, and sometimes annoying thing like you fix it and then you paste and copy it and it turns it back into what it think it should be. And
right.
That's not what I want.
Yeah, no, that's not right. Yeah. But we have done sessions where the guy that wrote the horn part knows nothing about horn writing or really the theory of music. And so it would be like a quarter rest. No, it would be like a 16th rest and a 16th note, and then a quarter rest, and then an 8th note, And then, you know, you're kind of going, wait a minute, what, you got a 16th note rest, 16th note, and then you got a quarter note rest, and then you have an eighth note. Where does that eighth note come? You know, so stuff like that. And that can happen in the computer as well. So, you know, it takes to make it sound like I want it to sound and then make it look like I want it to look is kind of two different jobs.
Oh, I want you to see if you can name this this lick.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh, because I have to try to vocalize it. Okay. Ba-da-da-da, bow.
So that's the Rosanna lick. So, and there is a note in there that most people don't know. It's all there's a ghosted note in E ghosted in there, and that's why it sounds like that, because you get that ghost, and then you get the second part of the lick, or if you just went, you know, that doesn't swing as well. So
I love that minutia. Wow.
yeah, so Dan Finero was on a session the other day, and he sang that, and I said, you know, there's this ghosted note, and he goes, no. Yeah.
Well, I used to have to play that on a synthesizer in a band, and it, believe me, I didn't get the ghosted note.
Yeah, no, most people don't.
Yeah. Okay, this one is more obscure, and I think it was a one-time artist for you. So see if this rings a bell. Digga digga, digga digga da, digga digga da 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 ba da ba da.
No,
Okay.
nothing.
I'll give you a hint. It was a British artist, and his name was Nick Kershaw.
Oh my God. Nick Kershaw to me was the hope for music, pop music back in the day. Great tunes, great changes, wonderful melodies, interesting ideas. He was, it was incredible. I just, you know, we went to hear him live a couple times, and it was just like, wow, I hope this is where music goes. And then he decided that that wouldn't it be good. His big hit song was #1 in the world, except for here. And he decided he didn't want to be a pop star and kind of went underground, and, you know,
I couldn't agree more. His music, his subject matter too, like there were no like just silly love songs. They were
no,
the topics were very deep, and the production, the whole shebang. I had a question about wouldn't it be good? There's that line there. Is horns are playing that, and is there a guitar playing with that?
it was. So the original thing for Nick Kershaw was this producer said, why don't we have some horns on your record? And Nick Kershaw said, oh, okay, you know, let's try it. And the producer said, what if we play the guitar solo? So it was original guitar solo. So I took the guitar solo off, and we played to the guitar solo. So, and then we also did, I said, you know, they had those other songs, that one, you know, so we did a couple of other songs, let the drums do the talking. It's brilliant. So that was just kind of a fluke that we played on that record, because I knew the producer, and the producer was going to be in LA. He was also an English producer. So yeah, just, you know, fortunate for us.
When you read the minutia about certain recordings. I'm amazed that like Al Jarreau song, Breaking Away. I was just reading the minutia about this, and they had 8 keyboard players and 2 guitars and 2 basses and horns, and recorded in 3 or 4 different studios. I don't have a question there, but it's amazing.
Well, different keyboards players on different songs. So, George Duke, I'm sure, played on some things, and that's a guy who played in Al's band for a long time, Tom Canning. I'm sure he was playing. Probably David Foster. Who else? I'm not sure. But and then the guitar players would be Jay Graydon, of course, who is producer, excellent guitar player. Steve Lukather played on some things. Probably maybe Larry Carlton or Ray Parker, depending on what the song called for. But that's kind of standard. And Jay was a producer on that, so he's kind of the overseer on everything. So it's gonna all sound, because it's Jay, it's gonna all sound like one unit.
Yeah, he had a great thing going on with those rhythm guitars, and a certain kind of effect on them was really distinctive. I understand he liked to start his studio sessions like at midnight or something.
Yeah, all of Jarreau horn parts were, I don't think we played a note before 11, maybe. And we would finish at 6 or 7 in the morning. And on the Jarreau record, we had already been booked during the day. The movie calls come out, a month ahead of time. And so, we're booked on other sessions from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 at night, playing on these whatever TV movies and everything. And then we go to Jarreau, we go to the Jarreau session and start at 11 and go till 6 or 7, literally go home, take a shower, go to the 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock session. And we did that for a week for the Jarreau stuff. And on the 5th day, the Friday of that week, we had a 9 o'clock call with Bill Conti for the 1984 Olympic music. And literally, I'd had 13 hours of sleep that week. And we go to this session, and we just got through with some brutal Jarreau stuff. One of those crazy, ridiculously hard songs, And so you got time to go home, take a shower, maybe get something to eat. 9 o'clock session, and it's 6 trumpets. So I got there pretty early, but not early enough to get the 6th trumpet book. I could only get the 4th trumpet book. Gary Grant beat me to the 6th trumpet book. Chuck Finley comes in at 1 minute to 9 o'clock, hair wet. Obviously, he hadn't, it came directly from home, walks in, and it's like and trumpet like solo over the strings, like bravura Olympic music trumpet solo. And then 4 pages of playing, and then at the end it's the same thing, trumpet solo on strings. And he played the living hell out of it. And at that point, I was lucky to even play. I was just shot. And so the rundown, he played it perfectly. 1 take, great. And a viola player, I think I have a wrong note. And yes, there was a wrong note. And we had to do it again. And Chuck played it better the next time. It was amazing. So that was kind of like the Chuck Finley that you always have heard about, and his legacy. And, it was it was incredible because of it. If I were in that situation, I couldn't have played it.
What a great story.
It was one of those rare moments in you go, okay, that is some sheer genius there to be able to pull that off.
Do you get envelopes in the mail on occasion with payments for things that you didn't expect?
Yeah, not a lot, but every once in a while they'll Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 is like $110 every couple of years, I guess, sort of. I played on I Love LA with Randy Newman on the session that we did on that record. The bridge part of it, if you know that. They said, well, what do you think about on this song? And I said, what about like a mariachi kind of thing? I Love LA, mariachi. So I played that mariachi style with like two, kind of sounded like Herb Alpert in harmony parts, if they used it, it's really soft in the mix. But because I'm on the contract for that, when they use I Love LA, I get a reuse for that. What else? I just got a Donna Summer reuse for, we did all those disco records that she did. So I just got, and that was $80 or something, like that. Yeah, but yeah, stuff, not a lot, but every once in a while something comes in.
Well, how do you price your own work, your writing? And did it change over the years? I assume there's something with the union involved, but then you eventually got beyond scale.
When I first started out, I didn't know anything. It did, I'm a trumpet player. I don't know anything about arranging fees or how you charge for that, So the Michael Jackson, like off the wall stuff was $500 a chart, a tune. And okay, that's a big success. So okay, let's raise it to $750 for the next kind of few years later, and you just kind of keep going. And then you hear guys that are charging $2,500 for a chart, or $5,000 for a string chart, or $10,000 for a string. I've never been good at charging that. What I have to make sure is that the players get paid the right amount, and it's always double scale for the players. So if, especially with the budget these days, if the budget is low and I want to do it, then I'll say, okay, you got to pay these guys double scale, and I'll take less from my arranging. Because I got enough money. I don't really need that anymore. What difference is, if I get an extra $500? Okay, let's put that into the players. Make sure the players are right. I've been having my son record the horns, and it's just so much better than anybody but maybe Bruce Swedien. He's incredible. And the guys come in, and everyone to a man will say he's the best guy they've ever worked with. So working with him, you got to pay him, you got to pay the guys. If it comes out of my money, I don't really care.
I think there was a quote about Bruce that he said, you can't just play softly with horns and then turn up the volume in the mix. You're not going to get anything. You're not.
That is true. My statement on that is, if you record a whisper and turn it up, it's still a whisper. It's just a loud whisper. But if you record a yell and turn it down, it's a yell. So taking that into how we play in the studio, it's pretty much full on all the time to get the intensity. So if they turn the horns down, the intensity is still there. So
what makes Quincy Jones and David Foster and those tremendously successful producers, is there a similarity to their personalities, or what made them so successful?
Quincy is all about personality. You just, when you go into the studio with him, you feel like the record would fail if you weren't in on this session. That's how he makes you feel, that you are a major part of this record making process. And it's family, it's you have a good time, you play great music, great engineer, great songs. He always works with the best artist. How can it not be great? And that's Quincy's thing. I mean, plus he picks songs, makes, he always says song comes first, and yes, it does. And anything else doesn't really matter if you got a great song. David Foster is brilliant musician. Like I said, he can sit down and play anything right away. There was a Rowe session that he was playing on with Abraham Laboriel bass, Lukather on guitar, I believe it was Steve Gadd on drums, and Jay Graydon, the producer, guitar player also, didn't like the bridge. So Jay said, man, David, I don't really like the bridge, let's work on the bridge. So they're all, including me, standing around the piano with David Foster, and he goes, doom, 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 how's that? And it was like, wow, that's ridiculous. I mean, this is just like cold doing this. And Jay would go, yeah, nah, try something else. And David would go, boom, doom, 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 boom, how's that? Totally different, equally as amazing. He did 6 or 7 like that, just like 8-bar changes that were like guys would kill for any of those 8 bars. Brilliant. And he just is, he's fantastic in the studio, just amazing. Totally different approach personality wise than Quincy. Quincy makes you feel like, the world revolves around you. David, it's all about David as the producer, regardless of who you are, even if you're Celine Dion or, Whitney Houston or anything, it's David is in charge there. But, we've, some of the best things I've ever done with David. It's always, the music is always great. Jay Graydon is, another musician coming along with David. Little less hands-on than David. David is really hands-on. Maurice White, another, brilliant producer with Earth, Wind and Fire. I learned some things with Maurice White that would, as I was saying before, when we would do horn parts and he would sing a part, and I'd say, well, Maurice said, that note's really, it's not really in the chord there that you're singing, he said, I think it's going to work. And, you go out and you play it and you kind of force it into the, okay, I get it. And then the more you listen to it, it's like, yeah, I like it.
I wouldn't have thought of that, right?
Yeah, no way. So, each producer that I've worked with has a little bit different approach as to how they get the finished product. You know, George Duke, great guy, great player, you know, just kind of knows the whole thing. He let me do some arranging for him. So
Do horn players still hate synthesizers?
If you know, if they're abusing a synth, yeah, of course. If you know, if they're you know, taking the place of horn parts, which still is kind of difficult to do for trumpet. It can you can kind of get away with it on baritone saxophone, and you know, if you're going to have like orchestra trombone pads, you can kind of get away with that, and French horns, you can sort of get away with it. But you know, synth is, if you use it like another musical instrument, you know, playing stuff that should be played by a synthesizer, then fine.
Did you ever have a situation where you were adding a real trumpet to synthesizer trumpets to give it a little authenticity?
Yeah, but if I was called, they would probably have me writing a horn chart and playing with a section rather than do that. I have done a few of those, playing along, not necessarily playing along with synth trumpets, but adding a trumpet to a synth part.
Okay.
You know.
Did you prefer the alto or the tenor in the Jerry Hey horns for the most part?
Never alto. Trumpet covers alto register, and tenor has more body to the sound than alto does. So I'm rarely right alto. I mean, a couple times when we did trumpet and alto, just like that, like, you know, only a two horn thing, you know, where it would be kind of unison, sort of in the treble staff. I would do that as a special kind of sound, but basically with the big section, it's always tenor sax and Barry.
I see. Do you miss, are you still playing?
No, I haven't been for, I don't know, been 10 years at least.
Yeah. Do you miss it that much?
Oh God, terribly.
Oh,
Yeah. I was, you know, if I could play and not arrange, I would take playing. But the arranging got us in as a section more than my playing did. So, you know, that's the good news is that, you know, I could do this arranging, and Quincy would call me to do the arranging. He wouldn't call me to do the playing, but because I was arranging, I was playing. And then he found out that we could play, but, you know, so the arranging kind of got my foot more in the door than the playing, I think. So it's, you know, it's kind of a curse of, you know, it's part of the reason that I'm not playing anymore, because I was so involved in the arranging that, you know, you have to worry about whether everybody's playing in tune, whether the cutoff was right, whether we're in time, whether the producer likes the horn parts, whether the engineer has a horrible sound on the trombone and we have to replay the whole song, which we have done many times. You know, there are so many other aspects to arranging for me that I wanted to make it sound like I know it should sound, that it took away from my trumpet playing. So, my focus was on the arranging and not on the playing. And it was always easy for me to go in originally. I could play anything. I mean, literally play anything. And so I could put my focus over there. But, the older you get, the harder trumpet gets. And then the focus still has to be over here to make sure that we're still sounding like we should sound. And the trumpet kind of started going downhill because of that. And then I had some health issues. And
do you ever get over the moment of, I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but the first time you're reading down what you arranged and you're in the studio and the producer is there and you're waiting to hear the comment about your parts, or do they already know sort of what it's going to sound like?
Well, I don't know if they, really got Quincy may, Foster may, but a lot of the other people that are more producers and less musician, they're not necessarily. But the reason they hired me is because they like what I've done in the past. So, they know what, I guess they're assuming that it's going to be what they're looking for. Sometimes, they'll say, I'm not really sure on that one. And okay, what can I do to make it better? But, anything that I write, it's not, I don't care if it's their record. If they don't like it, I'll change it,
Have you ever not gotten paid because they didn't like your writing?
No,
That's
no. I've not gotten paid a couple times because they were schmucks, but
okay.
But yeah, no, that they, it's that's kind of always up front. This is how much it's going to cost you. Studio engineer, horns and arranging. Okay, great.
I was going to ask for your advice, if you have any, for people trying to get into the business, but I'm actually going to turn the question around a little bit. What kind of things could a young studio musician do to get them taken off the contractors list?
Oh, to get them, take them off? Well, not show up on time. I mean, there are a whole host of things, not play well, don't show up on time, don't pay attention, make a kind of a ruckus in the studio, just kind of not be a kind of a team player, which is what I really like. Is the guys I use are they're there for the music, they're good guys, they're friends, just it becomes a team that way. So guys that are trying to make their own way and kind of stick out in a situation, that can draw attention to them. What else? Wanting to charge too much money sometimes. If guys, I've had guys say, well, I should be getting triple scale. Well, you know what? Everybody else is getting double scale. You're getting double scale. That's just how it works. That's kind of what we go in. So there are, it's easy to, and of course, guys like talking down other players, and that gets around quickly. Don't like that. So, there are quick ways you can get in bad way with a contractor.
I see. Did you ever see Quincy Jones get aggravated in the studio, and what would cause that?
I heard him talk one time about the music business, and a couple guys in the music business that he didn't like. Never anything in the studio. He likes, that the studio is a rare kind of piece of Quincy's life, that he likes to keep this family, everybody's, in loved, who comes into this room. He likes to keep that like that. So everybody wants to do their best for him and knows that, you're going in on a great artist and it's going to be a great song and great engineer and, do your best. And so he likes to keep that like that. One occasion that we played on a record, and it wasn't, it was a big band situation, and it wasn't all of the first call guys in there, and it didn't sound like it should sound. And he called me up the next day and went off on this tune. Just, I never heard him talk like that. It was just totally the opposite of what he was expecting to hear. So I said, Quincy, we were going to go in the next day, I think, to record some other tunes. And I said, we'll just come in and we'll just replace it. And okay, great. And that was the end of it. And we went in the next day, with 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, and 2 saxophones. And we redid a big band. We did, overdubbed the big band. And, Quincy's happy. So that was really the only time that I really heard him rag about the music part of it. But
was the original recording he didn't like, was it done live? Was it done live?
No, it was horn overdub.
Yeah,
but
okay.
it wasn't Bruce. So, that had a lot to do with it. So, we go in the next day and play it, and it's Bruce and all the great guys. And Quincy goes, "You guys just come in here, play the shit out of it." I said, "Well, that's what we're here for." So, he was happy.
Nice. Happy to hear that. I'll just wrap up with a question about what's coming up for you.
I have, a few things here and there, not a lot, and I'm okay with that. But I'll do kind of a project sort of a month. Guys will call me up. We just finished a project from a guy from Germany, flew over to do the horns on 3 tunes. And we have a movie coming up with that. My son works for Harvey Mason Jr. If you know of Harvey Mason Sr., the drummer, his son is a big time producer and working on movies mostly now. My son works for him as his engineer, and they're doing a movie that Pharrell has some songs in that we're going to play some horns on maybe next week. So, a few things here and there, and I got, a couple kind of pending projects, but, a project a month is kind of good.
Is it tough for you over the years you want to send in the Jerry Hey horns? So does that mean that you have to get on the phone with all the members every time you get called for a recording session to see that they can all make it?
Well, Gary Grant is not playing anymore. So, he was like a key member of the horn section. Bill Reichenbach has moved to near Asheville, North Carolina, and he's also was a key member. He comes back to play on movies now. He does all of John Williams movies and, does that and plays on movies, but he's not always here when I do a session. And Larry Williams, who's still playing saxophone, but because of a lot of times it's baritone saxophone now, and Dan Higgins plays, he plays everything amazingly well. So he's kind of been the main guy. So I always, I call the guys who I think are best for the job. And Wayne Bergeron is kind of the guy now who can play anything. So he plays. Andy Martin plays trombone, and Dan Higgins. And the second trumpet chair is kind of rotating, I guess. Dan Fanero's been playing a little bit, and a couple other guys play. Rashawn Ross, who plays with Dave Matthews. So, it's still called the Jerry Hey horns, although it's not the same guys. Mm-hmm. But, I'm doing the arranging, and it still kind of sounds the same.
Yeah.
Not quite the same, but close.
I'm sure it's excellent. It's a blessing to have that group of musicians who you'd have to go out of your way to get someone who wasn't cutting it.
Yes. Yeah. No, the guys can play anything that you're going to write. And, for me, I have to kind of, and because I'm not playing and we're not playing with, so the guys in the original horn section, I went to Indiana with Larry Williams, and Gary Grant, when we were living in Hawaii, Gary Grant came over to Hawaii, and we were together in Hawaii before we were in LA for 4 years. We were in Hawaii before that. So we've known each other for 52 years. Larry Williams has been 55 years. And Bill Reichenbach, I met on one session here when we were first in town in 1976. So, it's hard to get that team who played together for 40 years. And now you got new guys coming in who don't have that team, playing together thing that I kind of have to, okay, this is how I want that phrased, and this is, how I really want that to sound, and it's not necessarily like they would play it if I wasn't there. So, I'm still trying to put my influence on the tunes.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate your time today. And I should mention that I see that you're a Lakers fan.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you that I'm a Celtics fan. So
oh, no.
Maybe we'll meet in the playoffs, eh?
Oh, well, I don't know. LeBron's putting in too many minutes already. Yeah. The greatest rivalry back in with Magic and Bird.
Yes, indeed.
Was just spectacular. I would watch the game live and record it and watch it the next day again. And it's just the best of times.
Indeed.
Yeah. But
every once in a while, I'll get on the YouTube or whatever, watch Larry's greatest 10 whatever, and
I watched that recently. It's just incredible. But then somebody had the other day, they had Durant versus Bird and the stats and all that. Kevin Durant killed Larry Bird in stats.
Yes.
I don't know whether I would take Kevin Durant over Larry Bird, but it's kind of frightening. But I always say, if I had to start a team, of all the players the Lakers have had, Magic Johnson would be my first choice of anybody in the NBA to start a team, because he made everybody better.
All right.
As Larry Bird did.
Well, maybe someday we can meet in a bar over, and talk about Magic and Bird and continue that.
Yeah, well, I'm up for that. A glass of wine.
Thanks for your time today, Jerry.
Sure. Nice. Bye.
Right.